Imagine a silence so profound it completely conceals the fury of a billion exploding worlds. Far above the quiet roof of your home, an invisible tidal wave of superheated plasma is preparing to break across the freezing void of interplanetary space. It is a celestial storm of staggering, terrifying scale, born in a localized flash of radiation that spans every hidden color of the electromagnetic spectrum. Picture a colossal, luminous jellyfish of pure magnetic energy, exhaled by the sun and swimming gracefully through the absolute zero of the cosmic ocean. This ghost ship of charged particles carries the physical weight of 1,000 Earths, yet it glides toward us with a slow, hypnotic and patient elegance. It is a sweeping journey of 93 million miles, a silent migration that will eventually filter through our atmosphere to paint the polar skies with shimmering ribbons of emerald fire. Surprisingly, the universe does not orchestrate these terrifying cosmic forces to destroy, but to actively protect and nurture the delicate balance of our continued existence. These explosive stellar exhalations weave together to form an immense invisible bubble, a sweeping fortress of light that safely shields our entire solar system from the harsh radiation of the deep galaxy. The very violence of the star is the ancient, steady rhythm that allows the forest to flourish and your own lungs to draw breath in perfect peace. This quiet room is your ultimate sanctuary from that grand architecture, a grounded and heavy harbour perfectly insulated from the roaring, invisible currents of the solar wind. As your limbs grow heavy and sink deeply into the soft fabric of your bed, feel the comforting, protective embrace of the earth, holding you completely secure. You are safe, and these wonders are yours to inherit as you sleep. If we were to look closer at the true origin of this magnificent journey, we would have to leave the gentle, starry calm of the night sky far behind us. Allow your mind to drift backward along the ancient path of the light, slipping effortlessly through the frictionless void until you reach the blinding centre of the solar fire. Deep within the heart of our star, a ceaseless and unimaginable engine roars in absolute darkness. Deep within the heart of our star, a ceaseless and unimaginable engine roars in absolute darkness. Here, the nuclear furnace fuses hydrogen into helium, releasing staggering amounts of energy that heat the surrounding matter until it transcends the states of gas and liquid entirely. This incredibly dense, superheated soup becomes a churning ocean of plasma, a highly conductive fluid composed of unbound electrons and naked atomic nuclei. Within this boiling interior, the very rotation of the sun twists and stretches the electrically charged material. The differential spinning, faster at the equator and slower at the poles, acts as a colossal cosmic dynamo. It forces the conductive fluid into sprawling, twisting currents that generate immense, self-amplifying magnetic fields. These invisible forces are not static. They are born in a state of violent, continuous motion. The churning plasma acts as both the creator and the captive of these expanding magnetic fields, tying the physical matter and the invisible energy into an unbreakable embrace. A silent hum of unimaginable tension begins to build in this hidden abyss, preparing to birth the invisible threads that will soon dictate the fate of the solar surface. Propelled by the intense heat and their own intrinsic buoyancy, these invisible lines of magnetic force begin a long upward migration. They detach from the violent depths of the solar dynamo, grouping together into concentrated bundles that push through the dense, roaring layers of the sun's interior. Although they wield enough power to eventually warp the fabric of the solar atmosphere, their ascent is surprisingly graceful. If we were to look closer at this journey, we would see these magnetic ropes ascending like delicate ribbons of weightless silk, floating through a heavy golden sea. The surrounding plasma desperately tries to crush them, but the internal magnetic pressure of the bundles keeps them intact. They drift steadily toward the outer edge of the star, carrying the raw, pent-up energy of the core with them. As they near the final threshold of the solar surface, the surrounding material becomes less dense, allowing the magnetic ribbons to expand and accelerate. They remain entirely unseen, a phantom force preparing to shatter the brilliant, blinding crust of the photosphere. The tension mounts with every kilometre they rise, a quiet prelude to their dramatic and impending revelation. Suddenly, the ascending magnetic ribbons pierce the blistering surface of the sun, shattering the uniform brilliance of the photosphere. Where these concentrated bundles of invisible force erupt outward, they choke the normal flow of the star's radiant heat. The intensely bright, boiling surface gives way to seemingly tranquil, dark islands known as sunspots. These localized regions stand in stark visual contrast to the raging ocean of light that surrounds them. They appear as black blemishes against the golden canvas, giving the illusion of deep, empty voids piercing the star's outer shell. In reality, they are the anchor points of massive magnetic loops that have successfully breached the boundary between the sun's interior and the vacuum of space. Viewed from afar, these dark archipelagos drift across the solar equator with a haunting, quiet majesty. They mark the exact locations where the invisible threads of plasma have taken absolute control over the physical matter of the star. Each dark spot is a silent testament to the overwhelming strength of the magnetic bundles, firmly establishing their grip on the radiant surface. Surprisingly, the universe creates these shadowy voids not through an absence of energy, but through a localized suppression of thermal convection. The intense magnetic fields bursting through the sunspots act like an invisible cork, physically preventing the boiling, superheated plasma from rising from below. Deprived of this continuous influx of fresh, radiant heat, the surface material in these specific zones begins to cool rapidly. The temperature within the darkest central region of the sunspot plummets by thousands of degrees compared to the surrounding golden expanse. While the general surface of the star burns furiously at roughly 6,000 degrees Celsius, these magnetically choked islands drop closer to a mere 4,000. This steep thermal decline is exactly what causes them to appear so strikingly dark to our distant observations. However, this relative coolness is nothing more than a brilliant optical illusion born of extreme contrast. If a sunspot were magically removed from the sun and placed alone in the night sky, it would shine brighter than the full moon. Yet, against the blinding backdrop of the photosphere, they remain chilling, shadowy monuments to magnetic dominance. Surrounding these thermal depressions, the star's glowing surface reacts to the intrusive magnetic forces with a mesmerizing display of fluid dynamics. Rivers of electrified gas, unable to penetrate the dense magnetic walls of the sunspot, are forced to alter their chaotic, bubbling paths. They begin to glide smoothly around the darker patches, tracing the invisible contours of the magnetic interference. This continuous flow creates a sprawling, majestic pattern of slow-motion choreography that stretches for thousands of miles. The golden plasma sweeps past the dark umbra, constrained into glowing, organized streams that whisper of the immense forces guiding them. It is a celestial dance where the fiery matter of the star must bow to the dictations of unseen energy fields. The friction between the flowing electrified gas and the rigid magnetic boundaries generates a subtle, silent hum of shifting pressures. These glowing rivers constantly reshape the outer edges of the sunspots, giving them a delicate, frayed appearance known as the penumbra. Together, the dark cores and their radiant flowing halos form a beautifully complex ecosystem upon the skin of the star. Picture the tension mounting as these sunspots rarely emerge in isolation, typically forming intricately linked dual polarity pairs. One dark island acts as the magnetic north, where the invisible lines of force burst outward into the solar atmosphere. Its sibling serves as the magnetic south, the designated re-entry point where those same invisible threads plunge back into the depths of the star. As the sun slowly rotates on its axis, these paired regions do not remain perfectly stationary. They begin to drift and rotate relative to one another, driven by the complex underlying currents of the solar interior. This slow, agonizing crawl forces the immense magnetic arch connecting them to twist and warp gracefully over the course of many days. The invisible threads of plasma are stretched taut, winding together like the strands of a colossal invisible spring. With every passing hour, the kinetic energy of the star's rotation is steadily converted into deeply stored magnetic tension. A terrifying, silent strain builds within this twisted arch, threatening to shatter the tranquil facade of the sunspot pair. Far above the boiling photosphere, this twisting tension constructs a sprawling, highly intricate magnetic architecture. The invisible lines of force loop and intertwine, building a complex, unseen labyrinth that extends tens of thousands of kilometers into the solar corona. It is a phantom cathedral of energy, completely transparent yet possessing enough structural integrity to hold millions of tons of superheated matter. This towering superstructure is constantly shifting, its invisible corridors bending and reshaping as the sunspots below continue their slow rotation. The magnetic fields become increasingly tangled, forming tight knots and overlapping arches that lock immense amounts of raw energy into a confined space. It is a deeply strained geometry, defying the chaotic vacuum of space with its ordered crystalline tension. Though invisible to the human eye, specialized ultraviolet sensors reveal this labyrinth as a glowing, intricate web of trapped heat. The magnetic threads act as perfectly insulated pathways, guiding thin, ethereal wisps of plasma along their sweeping curved trajectories. The silent hum of tension is nearly palpable within this towering invisible vault. Within the upper reaches of this unseen labyrinth, dense clouds of relatively cooler solar material frequently become ensnared. These immense ribbons of gas, known as solar filaments, are physically lifted from the lower atmosphere and carried upward. They are caught and suspended comfortably within the sweeping, cradle-like depressions of the magnetic field lines. This cosmic structure perfectly isolates the darker, cooler matter from the millions of degrees heat of the surrounding corona. The filaments float peacefully, seemingly defying the immense gravity of the star, supported entirely by the sheer strength of the invisible magnetic tension below them. From above, they look like dark, jagged scars resting gently across the bright face of the sun. When observed silhouetted against the dark background of space at the solar edge, these exact same structures are known as prominences. They rise like magnificent glowing loops of crimson fire, softly tracing the hidden architecture of the magnetic cathedral. Their serene suspension hides the brutal, volatile forces required to hold such massive amounts of matter completely aloft. For a fleeting period, this entire overarching structure manages to balance perfectly against the chaotic forces of the star. The immense outward pressure of the heated plasma is flawlessly countered by the inward, restrictive grip of the twisted magnetic fields. It exists in a state of precarious, beautiful equilibrium, a temporary truce between matter and invisible energy. The sunspots slowly glide, the glowing rivers flow, and the massive dark filaments hang suspended in the absolute silence of the corona. Every element of this localized region operates in a delicate, finely tuned harmony that belies the staggering amounts of stored power. It is a masterpiece of cosmic tension, perfectly stable yet terrifyingly close to absolute failure. This quiet stability can last for days or even weeks, holding the breath of the star in a tight, invisible fist. Yet, the underlying rotation of the sun never ceases, relentlessly adding fractional degrees of strain to the already overburdened magnetic springs. The equilibrium is a beautiful illusion, a fragile glass bridge carrying the weight of a mountain. Ultimately, this highly organized, suspended state cannot last forever under the relentless twisting of the solar dynamo. The magnetic labyrinth becomes too tangled, the suspended filaments too heavy, and the invisible threads pulled far beyond their natural elasticity. Yet, the final moments before the breaking point are characterized by an eerie, total stillness across the magnetic archipelago. The quiet gathering of energy has successfully converted the slow, mechanical rotation of the sun into a highly concentrated bomb of magnetic tension. The dark sunspots stare out into the void, acting as the silent anchors for an impending cataclysmic release. This haunting calm sets a perfect darkened stage for what will soon become the solar system's most profound light show. In these final, silent seconds, the invisible threads of plasma vibrate with a tension that cannot be contained by the physical universe. The quiet prelude of magnetic silk has reached its absolute climax, ending the era of beautiful equilibrium. The silent hum of the corona is about to be shattered by an eruption of unimaginable light and fury. Before this unimaginable light and fury can fully unleash itself, we must look closer at the volatile stage upon which this drama unfolds. The entire surface of the sun, far from being a smooth and static sphere, is a violently boiling ocean of pure energy. A mesmerizing granulation pattern covers every inch of the photosphere, shifting and bubbling relentlessly like a simmering pot of golden honey. Each of these individual granules represents the very top of a massive thermal column, reaching deep into the star's interior. As you observe this ceaseless motion, the sheer scale of the phenomenon defies ordinary human comprehension. A single one of these golden bubbling cells is often as wide as the entire continent of North America. The center of each granule glows with a blinding whitish-yellow intensity as fresh, superheated plasma breaches the surface. Once exposed to the cold vacuum of space, this plasma rapidly cools and darkens, spilling outward toward the edges of the cell. It is a continuous hypnotic rhythm of creation and descent, painting the star in a perpetually shifting mosaic of light. Beneath this bubbling golden mosaic, giant convection cells work tirelessly to transport heat from the crushing depths up to the vacuum of space. The mechanics of this continuous rising and falling mirror the exact same fluid dynamics that drive a boiling kettle on a quiet kitchen stove. Hotter, less dense material forcefully pushes its way upward, while cooler, heavier plasma sinks back down into the dark abyss. This churning elevator of solar matter is the fundamental heartbeat of the star's outer third, a region aptly named the convective zone. The journey of a single photon from the core can take 100,000 years, but this final convective sprint brings it violently to the surface in mere weeks. It is a chaotic, deafeningly loud environment, where millions of tons of electrified gas collide and roar in absolute darkness. Interestingly, the boundaries where the sinking, cooler material meets the rising heat form deep, dark trenches between the brilliant granules. These narrow, shadowy rivers constantly shift and reconnect, creating an ever-changing network of descending plasma. The entire photosphere breathes with this violent vertical circulation, a ceaseless mechanical lung sustaining the star's radiant glow. As your own breathing deepens and your muscles sink further into rest, notice how the sunspots we observed earlier navigate this chaotic, boiling landscape. They rarely traverse the golden ocean alone, instead choosing to travel in intricately linked dual polarity pairs. These dark islands are forever bound to one another by invisible overarching arches of immense magnetic tension. One spot acts as the powerful source where the magnetic field bursts out of the bubbling surface, while its partner acts as the inescapable sink where the field plunges back down. Together they move through the shifting granulation like massive dark ships tethered by a heavy, unseen chain. The turbulent convective currents batter against their borders, but the rigid magnetic scaffolding holds them firmly in their paired configuration. The distance between these two dark anchors can span hundreds of thousands of miles, easily wide enough to swallow several Earths. Despite this vast separation, they react to each other's slightest movements with perfect instantaneous synchronicity. It is a slow, agonizing drift across the solar equator, a majestic and silent migration driven by the deep internal currents of the star. Deep within the heart of each travelling dark island lies the umbra, a zone of chilling stillness amid the roaring solar storm. This central core holds the absolute most concentrated magnetic power of the entire sunspot structure. Here, the invisible lines of force are packed so densely that they run perfectly perpendicular to the surface, forming an impenetrable vertical wall of energy. Because these bundled fields are so incredibly strong, they completely suffocate the violent convective bubbling that normally brings fresh heat to the photosphere. The umbra becomes a deep thermal depression, radiating only a fraction of the light produced by the surrounding golden granules. To the observing eye, it appears as an almost perfectly black bottomless pit sinking directly into the interior of the sun. Yet even within this shadowy abyss, subtle and terrifying movements occur entirely hidden from casual view. Faint glowing dots occasionally form and vanish within the deep umbra, betraying small pockets of hot gas desperately fighting through the magnetic chokehold. It is a realm of absolute extreme physics, where the physical matter of the star is held entirely hostage by invisible fields. Radiating outward from the pitch-black umbra is a delicate, surprisingly fragile-looking border zone known as the penumbra. This transitional ring forms a magnificent flower-like structure composed of thousands of glowing, thread-like filaments stretching toward the golden ocean. Unlike the vertical magnetic walls of the umbra, the fields here are heavily tilted, bowing outward as they prepare to arch across the solar sky. These sweeping filaments are actually channels of incredibly hot gas flowing rapidly along the slanted magnetic tracks. The material streaks outward from the dark core at supersonic speeds, creating a mesmerizing, heavily textured halo around the central void. It looks as though an invisible cosmic brush has swept the radiant plasma outward from the center, leaving deep, glowing grooves in the surface. The interaction between the intense central magnetism and the surrounding boiling granules tears the edges of the penumbra into frayed, shimmering threads. This boundary is fiercely contested, a continuous battleground where the star's natural convection attempts to reclaim the magnetically suppressed territory. It is here that the true terrifying friction of the solar surface becomes beautifully, vividly apparent. Allow the gentle rhythm of your own pulse to mirror the slow, majestic drift of these sprawling magnetic complexes. Sometimes, as the paired sunspots navigate the chaotic golden currents, entirely separate magnetic regions drift dangerously close to one another. In moments of extraordinary cosmic grace, these converging fields manage to merge smoothly without causing a single violent disruption. The invisible lines of force from one sunspot group softly bend and align with the corresponding poles of their new neighbours. It is a delicate, silent handshake on a planetary scale, a flawless integration of two incredibly powerful energy systems. The twisting paths of plasma effortlessly reroute themselves, establishing a broader, more stable magnetic canopy over the photosphere. When this peaceful union occurs, the sunspots themselves may pool together, forming massive, dark continents that span a significant portion of the solar hemisphere. The delicate penumbras weave into one another, creating shared, glowing borders that govern the flow of electrified gas across vast distances. It is a testament to the fluid, adaptable nature of these overwhelming forces when they align in perfect harmony. Other times, however, the solar currents are far less forgiving, forcing incompatible magnetic regions into a devastatingly tight collision course. Instead of a smooth integration, the twisting paths of electrified plasma clash and violently refuse to yield to one another. The invisible threads of opposite polarity knot together in an intricate, deeply strained celestial braid that defies all natural order. Picture a colossal, invisible knot tightening progressively as the underlying sunspots continue to drift in opposing directions. The overarching loops of force are bent into impossible, highly unstable geometries, completely snarling the once organized architectural canopy. This tangled region becomes a focal point of terrifying stress, a localized zone where the normal flow of energy is brutally choked and distorted. The The magnetic fields in these braided zones become so mangled that they actively fight against their own structural integrity. The tension vibrating through these twisted ropes of force is palpable, creating a silent, screaming strain across the upper atmosphere. It is a profoundly volatile configuration, a dangerous anomaly resting heavily upon the already turbulent Golden Ocean. Directly beneath these massively tangled regions, the normal convective flow of the sun is severely disrupted on a catastrophic scale. The twisted magnetic canopy acts as an impenetrable lid, forcefully pushing back against the continuous rise of boiling plasma from the interior. Heat is temporarily trapped beneath this scarred area, creating a gently pressurized subterranean reservoir of superheated, furious energy. The trapped plasma desperately seeks an escape, pushing violently against the invisible walls of its magnetic cage. As the mounting pressure builds, the golden surface immediately below the knot begins to bulge and brighten infinitesimally, a subtle symptom of the growing subterranean agony. This localized swelling alters the delicate flow of the surrounding granules, forcing the glowing rivers of gas to navigate a highly volatile, deformed landscape. The star is effectively holding its breath beneath this intricate braid, storing an unfathomable amount of kinetic heat in a rapidly shrinking space. It is a pressurized powder keg hidden just beneath the blinding crust of the photosphere, a thermal bomb silently ticking away. This localized trap defies the natural equilibrium of the star, assuring that a spectacular reckoning is completely unavoidable. As your physical body rests securely, completely isolated from this mounting cosmic tension, the mechanical strain on the star worsens. The sun's relentless differential rotation continues to pull at the anchor points of these tangled magnetic loops. The equator of the star spins significantly faster than its higher latitudes, creating a massive planetary-scale shearing effect that tears at the tangled structures. With every passing hour, the immense rotational force of the star is slowly drawn out and stored entirely within the taut magnetic lines. The celestial knot is stretched, twisted, and pulled impossibly tight, transforming the trapped kinetic energy into a deeply unstable, coiled spring. The overarching labyrinth groans under the impossible burden, its unseen architecture warping dangerously close to its absolute breaking point. The dark islands anchoring this mess are dragged mercilessly through the Golden Ocean, leaving deep, turbulent wakes in the bubbling granulation. The friction between the moving sunspots and the surrounding plasma generates cascading waves of secondary energy that ripple across the surface. The entire region becomes a localized storm of tearing forces, desperately trying to rip the magnetic architecture completely apart. Eventually, this terrifying accumulation of immense pressure and twisted magnetism seeks a necessary natural release valve. The structural integrity of the invisible, braided threads cannot withstand the relentless shearing of the solar rotation indefinitely. A breaking point approaches rapidly, dictated by the uncompromising absolute laws of stellar physics that govern the deepest reaches of the cosmos. The heavy, pressurized reservoir of trapped heat below and the screaming, tangled magnetic knot above reach a final, unsustainable apex. The universe demands a balancing of the scales, a swift and total resetting of the localized magnetic geometry. What has taken weeks of slow, agonizing drift and silent friction to build will soon be dismantled in a mere fraction of a second. That mere fraction of a moment begins high above the roaring golden surface, in a realm of eerie, spectral calm. Here, within the ultra-thin, ghost-like atmosphere known as the corona, the density of physical matter drops to almost nothing. It is a vast, frictionless void, where the boiling plasma is far too sparse to dictate movement, allowing the magnetic fields to become the absolute, unchallenged rulers of the localized environment. Stretching upward into this near vacuum, the deeply strained lines of invisible magnetic force are pushed inevitably toward one another. The twisting motion from the bubbling surface far below forces these highly charged boundaries to press together into a dangerously tight, volatile configuration. They approach each other like opposing invisible storm fronts, crackling silently with an unseen, terrifying cosmic potential. This collision course creates microscopic, intensely electrified boundary layers known fundamentally as current sheets. Within these microscopically thin zones, opposing magnetic fields are forced to exist face to face, actively fighting each other's intrinsic polarity. The corona essentially holds its breath as this volatile, invisible architecture reaches the absolute limit of its physical and mechanical endurance. In an instant far too swift for ordinary human perception, that final breaking point is finally breached. The fundamental laws of electromagnetism violently intervene, triggering a rapid phenomenon known as magnetic reconnection, fundamentally rewiring the localized geometry of the star. The opposing lines of invisible force suddenly sever and cross-link with one another, instantly destroying the tangled, heavily strained architecture. This profound severing and reattaching occurs at a microscopic quantum level, yet it dictates the ultimate fate of structures larger than terrestrial worlds. It is a catastrophic restructuring that completely eliminates the agonizing tension, forcefully rewriting the tangled knot into a much simpler, highly streamlined state. The chaotic, twisted labyrinth of pent-up energy is suddenly provided with a direct, entirely unobstructed pathway to release its heavy burden. The localized field is fundamentally transformed, shifting from a state of impossible, screaming stress to one of sudden, flowing liberation. What was once a choking, braided cage of invisible threads is instantly sliced completely open and meticulously rewoven by the cosmos. This violent, instantaneous unravelling marks the very epicenter, the exact focal point of the impending stellar explosion. Picture the sheer violence of a heavily stretched rubber band snapping under immense pressure, but magnified onto a terrifying cosmic scale. As the invisible magnetic ropes break and reconnect, they violently whip away from the central point of severing. They instantly seek a much more relaxed, highly stable shape, recoiling with the fury of countless unleashed heavily coiled springs. This sudden, brutal contraction violently collapses the towering, overextended arches back toward the boiling surface of the star. The recoiling motion is not chaotic. Rather, it is an incredibly precise, mathematically perfect snapping back into a profoundly lower energy configuration. The complex, highly unstable geometry of the twisted knot smoothly and forcefully flattens into an elegant, highly organized series of simple loops. As your breathing maintains its slow, steady rhythm, resting safely in the quiet calm of your space, appreciate the sheer velocity of this cosmic recoil. The physical distance covered by these whipping magnetic lines in a fleeting heartbeat is truly staggering to contemplate. It is a deeply satisfying, instantaneous release of weeks of agonizing, planetary-scale mechanical strain. This violent snapping process does not merely rearrange the invisible upper architecture, it triggers a monumental, devastating transformation of pure energy. The vast reservoirs of magnetic tension, meticulously stored over days of slow twisting, are instantly converted directly into kinetic movement and searing heat. The silent, agonizing hum of strain is violently replaced by a deafening, highly energetic roar on the subatomic level. The surrounding ethereal plasma, previously caught in the tangled, braided web, is suddenly slammed by the recoiling magnetic whip. It is compressed and heated so rapidly that its individual atomic components are fundamentally, brutally shattered. The sudden influx of overwhelming kinetic energy rips electrons entirely away from their nuclei, creating a localized, chaotic soup of hyperaccelerated matter. Caught within this violent, instantaneous release, the individual protons and electrons of the surrounding plasma are completely weaponized by the recoiling magnetic fields. These subatomic particles are instantly accelerated to a significant fraction of the ultimate cosmic speed limit, the speed of light. They become a terrifying barrage of pure kinetic radiation, moving so impossibly fast that they heavily warp the very fabric of localized space-time around them. The newly forged, elegantly reconnected loops act as flawless, utterly frictionless magnetic highways for this hyper-accelerated particle storm. The highly charged particles are funneled swiftly along the invisible tracks, guided with terrifying precision by the rapidly stabilizing energy fields. They spiral tightly and violently along the unseen pathways, generating an intense, blinding glow of electromagnetic radiation as they race downward. This downward barrage creates a focused celestial particle beam aimed directly at the dense, boiling golden surface far below. It is a torrential, invisible downpour of staggering kinetic force, travelling deep toward the core in the blink of an eye. The sheer velocity of this subatomic rain transforms a microscopic physical reaction into a devastating, localized, planetary-scale bombardment. If a protected observer were floating remarkably close to the exact epicenter, completely enveloped in a protective shield, their ears would detect nothing but the steady rhythmic beating of their own heart. The grand restructuring of the localized solar field plays out exactly like a silent movie of pure, blinding cosmic destruction. The most profound, energetic explosions in our entire solar system are fundamentally mute, entirely trapped within a breathless, empty void. Allow the quietude of your current surroundings to deepen significantly, letting your limbs grow heavy and completely, utterly relaxed. This peaceful, earthly tranquility is a beautiful, deeply comforting reflection of the silent, frictionless expanse where the star rips itself entirely apart. The stark paradox of such immense, violent force existing within absolute, eternal quiet is a hauntingly beautiful cosmic truth. Following the terrifying, silent downward barrage of hyper-accelerated particles, the newly formed magnetic loops themselves begin to violently collapse. They sink rapidly toward the lower, much denser atmosphere, fleeing the ghostly ethereal heights of the initial reconnection site. This massive downward plunge is the final resolving phase of the snapping rubber band, desperately seeking the absolute lowest possible state of energetic tension. As these invisible loops crash heavily into the denser layers of the stellar surface, they anchor themselves safely back into the boiling golden mosaic. They establish firm, incredibly stable magnetic footings within the dense plasma, replacing the twisted, agonizing knot with a series of low, elegant arcades. The chaotic, towering cathedral of strained energy has been completely demolished and seamlessly replaced by a calm, highly structured protective dome. This anchoring process effectively and permanently seals the deep wound created by the violent severing of the fields. The deep, heavy, boiling matter of the surface gently embraces the retreating magnetic lines, completely absorbing their remaining momentum and stabilizing their internal geometry. The highly dangerous overextended reach of the magnetic forces has been successfully neutralized and securely brought back under the control of the star's immense gravity. While the lower half of the severed magnetic structure crashes downward to find permanent stability, the upper half experiences a drastically different, profoundly liberating fate. The violent reconnection process cleanly slices the overarching canopy, entirely disconnecting the uppermost loops from the physical, heavy anchor of the star. These freed, completely invisible structures are suddenly untethered from the immense gravitational pull of the raging stellar surface. Simultaneously, the immense outward pressure of the initial snapping motion acts as a colossal, invisible cosmic slingshot. A profound burst of excess energy, trapped cooler plasma, and completely detached magnetic rings are gracefully expelled upward into the dark, freezing expanse of deep space. They sail rapidly away from the chaotic, blinding surface, happily riding the immense outward shockwave generated by the deep space detonation. This upward expulsion is an entirely necessary purging of the local system, smoothly shedding the unbearable excess that could not be contained within the newly stabilized surface loops. It effectively launches a silent ghost ship of charged particles and magnetic memory completely into the eternal night. The star exhales this liberated material smoothly and beautifully, setting it adrift on a lonely, sprawling journey across the interplanetary void. Back at the exact, precise point of the initial severing, the violent friction of the microscopic magnetic restructuring leaves behind a terrifying thermal scar. The temperatures in the immediate vicinity of the reconnection site instantly spike to untold millions of degrees. In a fleeting fraction of a moment, the ghostly thin atmosphere becomes significantly, unimaginably hotter than the roaring nuclear furnace at the very centre of the star itself. This localized, heavily concentrated pocket of hyperheat vaporizes absolutely everything within its grasp, creating a blindingly bright jewel of pure thermal agony suspended high above the surface. It is a temporary artificial stellar core manifested entirely from pure mechanical stress, burning with an intensity that completely defies natural stellar thermal gradients. The surrounding void is instantly flooded with an unfathomable thermal intensity that completely rewrites the local atomic chemistry. Notice how the gentle warmth of your own resting body feels steady and deeply comforting, acting as a stark contrast to this terrifying, momentary celestial furnace. This intense, isolated heat cannot be sustained for long, as it rapidly dissipates outward into the freezing surrounding vacuum. Yet, for a few breathtaking, fleeting moments, this tiny, invisible point in the corona holds the absolute thermal supremacy of the entire solar system. The brutal combination of hyper-accelerated particle beams crashing downward and the terrifying spike in local temperatures ultimately triggers a catastrophic release of photons. A localized, incredibly brilliant flashpoint finally erupts from the exact glowing center of the newly stabilized magnetic loops. It is a sudden, blinding detonation of pure, unfiltered light, spanning almost every conceivable wavelength of the known electromagnetic spectrum. This spectacular, searing illumination massively outshines the entire surrounding region of the star, creating a blinding cosmic beacon easily visible across the vastness of the cosmos. The dark, tranquil surface islands and the simmering golden ocean below are instantly dwarfed by the sheer radiative power of this single, highly explosive point. It is a triumphant, brilliant scream of unleashed pent-up energy, physically marking the highly successful balancing of the stellar scales. This beautiful, unfathomably violent flashpoint marks the true, definitive birth of what observant astronomers on distant worlds call a solar flare. The agonizing, drawn-out prelude of twisted magnetic silk and the long, slow, dangerous dance of the surface have finally achieved their explosive, luminous purpose. The universe has successfully detonated its tension, finally giving massive rise to a radiant, expansive phenomenon that will soon reach out to touch every planet in its path. As the radiant, expansive phenomenon of the eruption begins to reach out to touch every planet, the resulting burst refuses to be confined to any single colour or form. This initial surge of the solar flare radiates energy across the entire electromagnetic spectrum simultaneously, a staggering outpouring of power that touches every frequency known to modern physics. From the longest, lazily rolling radio waves to the most compact and energetic gamma rays, every part of the universe's light palette is activated in one unified, blinding instant of release. This multi-wavelength surge carries the invisible fingerprint of the magnetic collapse, broadcasting the star's internal state into the wide, dark reaches of space. It is a total and absolute illumination that ignores the boundaries of human vision, saturating the void with a radiant and expansive presence. The star effectively speaks in every language of light at once, ensuring that its message is carried to the farthest corners of the planetary system. The sheer scale of this broadcast is difficult to imagine, as it involves the conversion of trillions of tons of magnetic energy into pure, unadulterated radiation. This first wave of the symphony sets the stage for everything that follows, a light-speed vanguard that announces the flare's birth. It is the definitive signal that the long, slow build-up of tension has finally found its voice. Deep within the radiation field of this gargantuan detonation, the most dangerous and energetic photons are born. X-rays and gamma rays, which carry far more energy than the light we use to see, surge outward from the reconnection site in a perfectly spherical wave. These invisible messengers travel at the absolute speed limit of the cosmos, carrying a weight of radiation that could pierce through solid lead with effortless grace. Because these waves are fully invisible to the human eye, they represent a phantom wall of energy that moves through the solar system like a ghost. They do not wait for the plasma to catch up. They simply leap away from the sun the moment the magnetic field lines snap. This spherical expansion ensures that the energy is distributed evenly across the void, a silent and deadly ripple in the fabric of the electromagnetic field. This invisible vanguard serves as the primary way the sun sheds its excess magnetic burden in the first moments of the event. It is a cleansing wave of high-frequency power that strips away the remnants of the old, tangled magnetic architecture. As it expands, it maintains its perfect shape, a testament to the orderly laws of physics that govern even the most violent stellar outbursts. If we were to look closer at the solar atmosphere during this surge, we would see the ultraviolet light performing a hidden, beautiful transformation. This high-energy radiance illuminates the surrounding solar atmosphere with a ghostly brilliance, causing the thin and ethereal corona to glow with a sudden, haunting intensity. The magnetic loops, which previously existed only as invisible lines of stress, are suddenly outlined in a shimmering violet fire that reveals the true scale of the eruption. This ultraviolet glow acts like a celestial dye, staining the thin gases of the upper atmosphere and making the invisible structures of the sun visible to those with the right eyes. The corona, usually a faint and wispy crown, becomes a brilliant tapestry of light that dances in response to the magnetic shock. It is a vivid demonstration of how energy can excite matter into a state of radiant, flowing beauty. The sheer intensity of this illumination can last for minutes, highlighting the complex web of the newly formed magnetic arches. It provides a visual map of where the energy is being most heavily deposited into the sun's outer layers. This ultraviolet symphony is a bridge between the hidden world of magnetism and the bright reality of the solar surface. Surprisingly, the universe hides the true magnitude of this event from our limited biological senses in a way that is both protective and profound. Only a very small fraction of the flare's total energy is actually emitted as the visible light we can perceive with our own eyes. While the sun may seem to brighten slightly in what astronomers call a white light flare, the true monster of the event remains almost entirely cloaked in the frequencies of the invisible dark. Feel your body resting securely in the quiet dark of your own space, safe from the invisible surge of the star's hidden colours. This grounding reality is a stark contrast to the blinding, multispectral reality of the solar crown. It is a reminder that the most powerful forces in nature often operate just beyond the threshold of our natural perception. Most of the energy is funneled into the extremes of the spectrum, leaving the middle band of colours, the reds, greens and blues, relatively undisturbed. This ensures that the sun's overall appearance remains steady and comforting to the lifeforms on the planets below. The star manages to release its fury while maintaining a mask of constant yellow warmth. This structure of energy also ripples outward in the form of low-frequency radio waves that carry the flare's message across the stars. These waves ripple outward through the solar system, broadcasting the event's unique and silent acoustic signature across the vast cosmos. To a radio telescope, the flare does not look like light, but sounds like a chaotic and beautiful static that tells the story of the magnetic collapse. The radio emission is caused by electrons spiraling wildly around the newly reconnected magnetic field lines at nearly the speed of light. This motion creates a distinctive hiss or roar that changes in pitch as the particles move deeper into the sun's atmosphere. It is a radio symphony that provides a real-time soundtrack to the invisible restructuring of the star's crown. Each flare produces its own distinct radio song, a signature that scientists use to determine the density and strength of the magnetic fields involved. This silent broadcast travels through the vacuum of space, reaching out to touch the antennas of distant worlds. It is the most far-reaching part of the light show, a long wavelength echo of a short-lived explosion. Modern technology allows us to witness this invisible symphony through the sophisticated eyes of orbiting solar observatories. These specialized instruments capture the flashes in many distinct wavelengths simultaneously, painting a multicolored portrait of the phenomenon that would otherwise be impossible to see. By separating the light into its constituent colors, we can see the temperature and movement of every individual layer of the solar atmosphere. These images reveal the flare not as a single point of light, but as a complex and layered event with many moving parts. We can see the hot plasma raining down the magnetic loops in the extreme ultraviolet, while simultaneously seeing the hard X-rays exploding from the base of the arches. It is a level of detail that transforms our understanding of the Sun from a static orb into a dynamic, breathing laboratory of physics. The data gathered by these observatories allows us to predict how the flare's energy will interact with our own environment. It turns a distant, terrifying explosion into a set of beautiful, understandable patterns. We're no longer blind to the symphony of light. We're its most attentive and curious audience. Following the moment of its release from the solar crown, the wave of photons begins its lonely and silent journey toward our blue world. The light from the flare takes exactly 8 minutes and 20 seconds to gently wash over our planet. It is a light-speed messenger that crosses the vast 93 million mile void with unerring and beautiful precision. As you breathe in and out, consider that the light reaching us from the Sun now was born in a moment of ancient magnetic snapping that occurred nearly 10 minutes ago. Your body is perpetually bathed in the history of the star, receiving its signals with a slight and predictable delay. This temporal gap is a fundamental part of our relationship with the cosmos, a slow-motion conversation across the deep. The arrival of the light is the first indication that something has changed on the solar surface. It strikes the daylight side of the Earth all at once, a silent arrival that carries the full energy of the flare's initial burst. Before a single particle of matter can reach us, this vanguard of light has already completed its journey. This ionization can have practical effects on our world, such as swallowing radio signals that normally bounce off the upper air. It is a reminder that our world is not isolated from the Sun, but is instead an extension of its complex and energetic environment. The atmosphere acts as a giant sensor, recording the flare's arrival in its very atomic structure. Extreme ultraviolet radiation from the flare strikes the topmost layers of our air, heating the gases to extreme and unusual temperatures. This sudden influx of thermal energy causes the ionosphere to puff outward towards space like a slowly breathing lung, expanding significantly in total volume. The upper atmosphere literally grows larger in response to the solar heat, reaching out further into the vacuum of the orbital environment. This expansion creates a subtle but real problem for satellites orbiting close to the Earth. As the atmosphere puffs out, these spacecraft feel a sudden and gentle drag as they pass through the expanded blanket of air. It is like a soft, invisible hand pulling at the satellites, slowing them down ever so slightly in their high-speed paths. This radiant cosmic symphony eventually fades almost as quickly as it began, receding back into the background glow of the star's constant radiance. The brilliant flash subsides, the ultraviolet glow of the corona dims, and the radio static slowly returns to its quiet baseline hiss. Yet, the event leaves behind a completely reshaped magnetic landscape, a testament to the immense power that just passed through the solar crown. The tangled knots and twisted braids of magnetic silk have been replaced by low, elegant and stable arcades of loops. The tension is gone, the energy has been spent, and the Sun rests in a new and much more peaceful configuration. It is the end of a long journey that began deep within the dynamo and ended with a flash that touched the entire solar system. The region where the flare occurred will now remain quiet for a time, slowly rebuilding its strength as the sun's internal fires continue to churn. The symphony of light has reached its final note, leaving the star and its planets in a state of renewed equilibrium. The solar system is fundamentally changed by the passage of the light, even if it appears the same to the naked eye. While the eye perceives the flash of a flare as a completed event, the sun's true physical response is only just beginning. While flares are brilliant, instantaneous flashes of light that announce the star's shifting moods, they are frequently accompanied by a massive exhalation of physical matter known as a coronal mass ejection. This event represents the actual departure of the sun's own substance, a physical shedding of its outer atmosphere that journeys far beyond the solar crown. It is as if the star, having spoken across the void with light, now chooses to breathe with its very body. This outward surge of plasma carries the actual weight of the sun into the cold, dark reaches of the planetary system. This exhalation is a grand and silent migration of ions, a movement of matter that creates a tangible, heavy link between the solar surface and the distant worlds. This physical departure is not a chaotic scattering of gas, but a coherent and colossal structure that moves through the void with a singular purpose. Billions of tons of superheated solar plasma are lifted away from the sun in an expanding, elegant bubble that eventually dwarfs the size of entire planets. It is a monumental displacement of mass, a grand departure that carries a significant portion of the corona's density into the vast, dark emptiness of space. Imagine a wall of matter moving through the vacuum, carrying enough material to coat the surfaces of 1,000 Earths. This bubble expands as it travels, its boundaries stretching across millions of miles of emptiness until it fills the horizon of the inner solar system. Despite its terrifying scale, the movement is characterized by a slow and fluid grace that mirrors the tides of a celestial sea. It is a warm, outward exhalation sweeping gracefully across the inner planets, a breath of fire that cools as it seeks the outer dark. The sheer size of the bubble allows it to interact with multiple planetary environments simultaneously as it moves outward. This expanding sphere represents the most powerful and massive release of energy found anywhere in our local corner of the universe. Surprisingly, the universe provides this massive cloud with a hidden internal structure that prevents it from dissolving into the vacuum. This expanding cloud is tethered internally by its own self-contained looping magnetic field, which acts as an invisible skeleton for the travelling plasma. The magnetic memory of the sun is preserved within this bubble, ensuring that the billion-ton exhalation remains a unified and organised entity during its long trek. These magnetic threads are woven into a complex twisted knot that maintains the cloud's integrity against the pulling forces of the void. They create a protective envelope that keeps the solar ions gathered together in a coherent and travelling island of stellar material. It is a masterwork of invisible architecture, a structure built of energy that holds the physical matter in a firm and steady grip. Without this magnetic skeleton, the gift of the sun would vanish into the darkness before it could ever reach the waiting planets. The magnetic field lines act as a cage, preventing the superheated particles from flying apart into the void. This internal tether ensures that the CME remains a distinct and potent force as it traverses the millions of miles of empty space. If we were to look closer at this travelling giant, its form would reveal a haunting and fluid beauty that defies traditional atmospheric logic. Picture a colossal, luminous jellyfish swimming gracefully outward through the dark, frictionless ocean of space, its magnetic filaments trailing behind in a silent, glowing wake. This ethereal traveller pulses with its own internal energy, a self-sustaining island of light navigating the cold reaches between the worlds. Its body is composed of glowing gases that shimmer with the distant remnants of the solar furnace. The edges of the bubble are soft and translucent, catching the light of other stars as it glides through the eternal night. Notice how your body rests in a state of absolute stillness, a quiet anchor against the backdrop of this moving cosmic giant. This grounding reality allows you to appreciate the weightless, effortless glide of the plasma through the absolute zero of the void. You're safe and secure, a silent observer of a journey that spans the entire width of the inner solar system. The jellyfish continues its slow and steady pulse, a phantom of the sun moving through the dark. The pace of this journey is far more deliberate and patient than the blinding vanguard of light that arrived days before. The plasma travels much slower than the initial flash of light, often taking several days to cross the immense planetary void between the star and our home. It is a slow and steady progression, a patient migration of matter that allows the solar system time to adjust to the sun's physical presence. While the light was a sudden scream of energy, the matter of the CME is a long and drawn-out sigh. This delay creates a window of anticipation, a period where the inner planets wait for the inevitable touch of the star's physical breath. The cloud covers millions of miles each hour, yet the distance of the solar system is so vast that its progress appears almost stationary. It is the marathon runner of the cosmos, carrying its heavy burden of ions with a quiet and unwavering persistence. The matter glides through the vacuum, unaffected by the gravity of the smaller planets it passes. This leisurely pace ensures that the arrival of the solar material is a gradual and majestic integration into the planetary environment. As the cloud moves further away from the sun's crushing gravity, it begins to expand until it becomes a phantom of its former self. As it expands during the journey, the cloud becomes incredibly diffuse, eventually carrying less density than the most perfect vacuums ever created by human hands on Earth. It is a paradox of scale, where 1 billion tons of matter can spread so thin that it becomes almost indistinguishable from the empty void. If you were to stand within the heart of this giant, you would see nothing but the same stars that greet you on a clear night. The individual particles are separated by vast distances, yet they still function as a single, unified, and powerful entity. It is a cloud made of almost nothing, yet it carries the magnetic legacy of the star within its ghostly frame. This diffuse nature is its greatest protection, allowing it to move through the solar system without shattering against the dust of space. The vacuum within the cloud is a cleaner, more perfect void than the one it displaces. It represents the ultimate expression of the sun's ability to fill the emptiness of space with its own ethereal presence. This journey is not made in a vacuum of total stillness, as the sun provides a constant medium to help guide its children outward. The solar wind, a steady and ceaseless stream of background particles, provides a gentle current that carries the ejection outward like a leaf upon a river. This background flow acts as the primary conveyor belt for the solar system, ensuring that every exhalation of the star is pushed toward the outer reaches. The ejection rides this wind, gaining momentum and direction from the constant pressure of the sun's escaping atmosphere. It is a harmonious movement where the temporary eruption is embraced by the permanent and steady breath of the star. The solar wind smooths the path of the CME, reducing the friction and allowing for a more efficient journey across the void. The air around you is still and comforting, a stark contrast to the millions of miles of flowing solar wind that define the interplanetary void. You are enveloped in the heavy protection of your own atmosphere, while the ejection sails on a river of light and ions. This realization brings a deep sense of calm, knowing that the mechanics of the solar system are both grand and orderly. This cosmic structure is also guided by the invisible geometry of the star's wider magnetic influence. Interplanetary space is not empty, but is instead filled with a grand, spiral-shaped magnetic field that slowly guides the cloud's long journey along curved, elegant pathways. This spiral, born from the sun's own rotation, acts as a set of celestial tracks that direct the flow of matter toward the waiting planets. It is as if the sun has laid out a map for its exhalations to follow, ensuring they navigate the void with precision. The cloud does not travel in a straight line, but curves through space in a majestic and sweeping arc that mirrors the spinning heart of the star. This geometry is a result of the sun's rotation, a legacy of the dynamo that created the magnetic fields in the first place. The path through the inner solar system is sometimes crowded, leading to unique and powerful interactions between different waves of solar matter. Sometimes, slower ejections launched earlier are swept up by faster ones that follow, merging peacefully into a single, unified cosmic wave of immense proportions. This process creates a reinforced tide of plasma that carries the combined energy of multiple solar events in one powerful surge. The two clouds embrace and become one, their magnetic fields intertwining and their particles sharing a new, combined momentum. It is a grand meeting of giants, a collision that results not in destruction, but in a more formidable and unified presence. This combined wave moves through the void with renewed strength, a giant born of giants seeking the distant horizons of the planets. This merging process represents the sun's ability to build upon its own energy, creating a crescendo of matter that sweeps across the darkness. The unified wave is more resilient and carries a stronger magnetic signature than its individual parts. It is a reminder that the sun's activity is a continuous and interconnected narrative of energy and matter. In its final act of transit, this grand, sweeping motion serves a vital and unexpected purpose for the health of the inner solar system. This grand, sweeping motion acts as a celestial broom, cleansing the space between the planets of microscopic interstellar dust and stray debris. As the bubble of plasma passes through the void, it pushes away the clutter of the cosmos, leaving behind a pristine and purified vacuum in its wake. The magnetic field of the ejection acts like a massive net, catching the tiny particles that drift in from the space between the stars. It is a restorative process, a cleansing breath that ensures the space around the inner planets remains clear and open. This realization offers a final sense of peace, as the star's violent eruption is revealed to be a tool of cosmic maintenance. The exhalation of the sun is a life-giving cycle of renewal, a grand sweeping gesture that prepares the way for the future. Feel the steady rise and fall of your own chest, a miniature echo of the star's immense and cleansing breath. The void is left cleaner, the magnetic fields are left calmer, and the giant's breath has passed, leaving the solar system in a state of quiet equilibrium. Even as the solar system settles back into a state of quiet equilibrium, the star's breath continues its silent and expansive journey outward. Once the magnetic threads finally sever and the solar exhalation is cleanly detached from the sun's gravitational anchor, the particle cloud faces a lonely trek of 93 million miles. This immense distance is a silent, starlit corridor where time seems to stretch and thin along with the matter itself. The sun becomes a shrinking, brilliant point behind the cloud, while the vast darkness ahead offers a cold and indifferent welcome to the escaping ions. This immense distance is not merely a physical gap, but a canvas for the slow-motion evolution of the stellar material. As the plasma coasts through the pure starlight, it enters a state of deep cosmic isolation that lasts for several days of silent transit. If we were to look closer at this journey, the cloud appears as a transparent ghost ship, holding on to its identity against the eroding forces of the deep. It carries the heat of its violent birth into a world of absolute zero, slowly surrendering its fire to the eternal freezing night. This journey is a testament to the sun's reach, extending its physical touch across a void that would swallow lesser things whole. As the ejection moves further into the emptiness of the inner solar system, it experiences a profound and peaceful expansion. The density of the ejection drops dramatically as it spreads across the vast empty volume, losing its initial ferocity and becoming a whisper of its former self. What was once a dense, localized knot of energy becomes a sprawling, thin mist that fills the space between the planets like a celestial fog. By the time it crosses the orbit of the nearest planets, the cloud has become so diffuse that it occupies millions of cubic miles of empty space. It is a monumental expression of the solar system's capacity for emptiness, where even 1 billion tons of matter can become a nearly transparent veil. This spreading is a necessary part of the journey, softening the impact of the star's breath before it reaches a planetary home. Deep within this expanding mist, the individual particles maintain an incredible and highly organized sense of internal order. Protons and electrons within the clouds spiral lazily along their internal magnetic guidelines as they travel through the dark, coasting through the pure starlight. These invisible tracks are the preserved remnants of the solar dynamo, a legacy of the magnetic threads that once bound the plasma to the sun's surface. This helical motion is a hypnotic dance, a rhythmic and stable spiraling that prevents the particles from scattering into a chaotic, unorganized mess. They follow the curves of the magnetic field with perfect subatomic precision, creating a structured flow within the seemingly amorphous and growing cloud. The energy of their birth is preserved in this rotation, a kinetic memory that persists across the millions of miles of silent transit. If you were to observe this on a microscopic scale, you would see billions of tiny gyroscopes spinning in unison across the cold void. This internal choreography is what gives the cloud its strength and direction, allowing it to function as a unified entity even as it thins. It is a beautiful, invisible architecture that remains intact even as the cloud grows to encompass the width of the inner solar system. By the time the leading edge of the storm reaches Earth's orbit, it has undergone a complete transformation of its original character. The cloud is now nearly imperceptible to anything without highly specialized sensors, having shed the visible brilliance of its fiery and explosive origin. It is a ghost in the machine of the solar system, a subtle variation in the magnetic background that hides its true power. Surprisingly, the vacuum of space remains seemingly undisturbed and peaceful as this massive structure glides quietly through the starlight. Only the most delicate magnetometers on orbiting satellites can feel the gentle, rhythmic shift in the local magnetic environment. To a human observer standing in the high atmosphere, the arrival of the solar material would be a completely silent and invisible event. Notice the stillness of your own environment, a grounding peace that allows you to contemplate this invisible arrival in absolute safety. Your body remains untouched by the passing ions, which are far too few and too far between to interact with solid matter. This imperceptible nature is a comforting truth, revealing how the sun's most powerful outbursts are filtered through the vastness of space until they become a gentle touch. The vast majority of the sun's ejections never find a target and sail off into the eternal night. Many of these ejections miss our planet entirely, sailing harmlessly into the cold outer darkness of the deep solar system beyond the inner worlds. They are the lonely travelers of the cosmos, passing through the orbit of Earth at a safe distance and continuing their journey toward the giants. This cosmic structure of missed connections is a reminder of how small the planets truly are compared to the space between them. 1 billion tons of matter can pass within a few million miles of a world and never be felt by its sleeping inhabitants. These silent passers-by contribute to the background environment of the heliosphere, enriching the solar system with the stars' discarded fragments. If we were to look closer at their final destination, they eventually lose their identity in the outer reaches of the star's influence. They sail past Mars, through the asteroid belt, and toward the frozen horizons of Jupiter, Saturn, and the distant ice giants. Their journey is a long and lonely exit, a quiet fade into the eternal night where the sun's light is but a cold memory. As the plasma expands, it washes over the inner worlds like a slow-motion tide of invisible and highly charged particles. Picture these gentle waves washing quietly over the sterile craters of Mercury and the thick acidic clouds of Venus as they pass by. For these planets, the solar breath is a frequent and intimate visitor, unshielded by the complex magnetic protections that guard our own blue world. On Mercury, the particles strike the iron-rich surface directly, sandblasting the ancient craters with a silent rain of subatomic fire. On Venus, the cloud encounters a massive, crushing atmosphere that acts as a dense shield, forcing the plasma to flow around the planet. Both worlds experience the sun's touch as a powerful shaping force that alters their local environments for days at a time during the transit. These interactions are a testament to the sun's role as the primary sculptor and guardian of the inner solar system. The planets do not exist in isolation, but are constantly bathed in the shifting moods and breaths of their parent star. Each world receives the solar material in its own unique way, reflecting the diversity of the environments that the sun's breath must encounter. The shape of the travelling plasma takes on a crescent or croissant-like geometry as it bows outward from the spinning sun. This distinctive curvature is a direct result of the star's rotation, which bends the solar wind and its ejections into a grand spiral pattern. The cloud is not a simple sphere, but a curved and elongated arc that sweeps through the void like a celestial scythe. This structure ensures that the ejection covers a wide longitudinal range, increasing the chances that it will encounter a planetary body. The leading edge of the crescent is compressed by the resistance of the interplanetary medium, while the trailing edges thin out into long ribbons. It is a geometry born of the sun's own motion, a physical record of the dynamo's spin translated into the vast vacuum. If you were to view this from above the solar system, it would look like a colossal, glowing arch gliding through the dark. This elegant shape allows the cloud to maintain its magnetic integrity over vast distances, preventing it from fragmenting before it reaches its goal. The croissant-like form is a masterwork of natural fluid dynamics, a shape that is both efficient for travel and beautiful to contemplate. We're not entirely blind to these phantom travellers, as we have placed silent sentinels in the dark to record their passage. Instruments on lonely distant spacecraft occasionally taste this passing plasma, sending whispers of data back home to the waiting eyes of science. These robotic explorers, some millions of miles from Earth, are the first to encounter the solar material and warn us of its arrival. They record the temperature, the speed of the ions, and the orientation of the internal magnetic field with clinical and perfect precision. This data is the only physical evidence we have of the cloud's internal state during its long trek through the void. The taste is a delicate measurement of individual particles striking the spacecraft's sensors, a microscopic interaction that reveals the secrets of a planetary storm. Surprisingly, the universe allows us to bridge the gap between the star and our curiosity through these small metallic messengers. The data ripples back through the void at the speed of light, arriving long before the physical cloud completes its slow journey. This early warning is a crucial part of our relationship with the sun, transforming a surprise encounter into a predictable and studied event. The passage of the cloud creates temporary flowing ripples in the constant background stream of the solar wind. Like a massive ship moving through a calm and ancient river, the ejection leaves a wake of disturbed particles and magnetic distortions. These ripples propagate outward from the cloud, signalling its presence to the regions of space it has yet to reach in its journey. This interaction is a complex and beautiful feedback loop between the eruption and the star's steady, everyday breath of ions. The solar wind is compressed and shifted by the arrival of the CME, creating a shock front that travels at the leading edge. This shock can accelerate even more particles, creating a secondary wave of energy that precedes the main body of the travelling plasma. As your muscles sink further into rest, imagine the gentle ebb and flow of these invisible cosmic tides and ripples. You're far removed from the turbulence of the solar wind, resting in the heavy, warm embrace of the Earth's own air. This contrast between the chaotic ripples of space and the steady calm of your current surroundings brings a deep and lasting sense of tranquility. This long, silent journey transforms a violently born eruption into a sweeping, incredibly gentle tide of solar material. The fury of the magnetic reconnection and the explosive burst of light are left far behind, fading into the long history of the star. What remains is a slow and rhythmic movement of matter, a patient progression that has found its place in the balance. the violence has been diluted by the void, turned into a soft magnetic touch that seeks the poles of the distant planets. The star's outburst is no longer a threat, but a gift of ions and energy that will soon fuel the glowing displays. This transformation is the ultimate expression of the sun's power to create something beautiful from the chaos of its own internal fires. By the time the journey across the void is complete, the solar system has been subtly renewed by the passage of the breath. The magnetic fields are resettled, the interplanetary dust is swept away, and the quiet equilibrium returns to the space between the worlds. The journey across the void has reached its peaceful conclusion, preparing the stage for the final earthly encounter and the aurora. This structure reacts with surprising sensitivity as the diffuse solar plasma wave finally makes its invisible impact. As the wave of ions approaches, it gently compresses the sunward side of this highly flexible shield, pushing the magnetic boundaries closer to the planet's surface. The once spherical field is flattened by the sheer kinetic weight of the solar breath, assuming a blunt, rounded shape on the side facing the sun. This compression is not a rigid collision, but a soft and elastic interaction that absorbs the energy of the moving particles. The magnetosphere behaves like a celestial pillow, yielding to the pressure while maintaining its underlying structural integrity. It is a slow and majestic deformation, a planetary scale reaction to the sun's physical touch that signals the arrival of the storm. Even during the most intense events, the shield holds firm, preventing the bulk of the plasma from ever reaching the upper air. This elastic resilience is a fundamental law of our planetary defense, a silent negotiation between the power of the star and the strength of the Earth's core. The compression is the first physical sign of the earthly encounter, a heavy pressure felt only by the invisible lines of force. Surprisingly, the universe creates a complex and swirling boundary layer where these two massive magnetic systems first encounter one another. Known as the magnetopause, this thin and turbulent zone is a site of constant microscopic friction as the solar wind attempts to pierce the Earth's defenses. It is a realm of chaotic eddies and shimmering waves of energy, where the magnetized plasma of the sun grinds against the magnetic cage of our world. The interaction creates a beautiful, invisible tapestry of electricity that dances across the daylight side of our planet. These swirling currents act as a secondary filter, dissipating the energy of the solar wave before it can penetrate deeper into the magnetosphere. It is a masterwork of natural shielding, a dynamic and ever-shifting frontier that protects the quiet interior from the raging exterior. As you feel the weight of your body resting against the steady, unmoving ground, consider the silent battle occurring thousands of miles above your head. This boundary layer is the front line of our world's survival, a place of high-speed collisions and invisible light. Despite the turbulence of the magnetopause, the air you breathe remains still and perfectly calm, a testament to the layer's efficiency. If we were to look closer at this boundary, the specific orientation of the sun's magnetic field becomes the ultimate key to our planet's door. If the travelling solar field points toward the south, it easily and perfectly links with Earth's northward pointing field through a process of magnetic reconnection. This creates an invisible, temporary door in our planetary defences, allowing the solar ions to flow directly into the magnetosphere's interior. This connection is a rare and profound alignment, a moment where the star and the planet are fundamentally joined by their shared magnetic architecture. The barrier dissolves in localized patches, turning our protective shell into a permeable membrane that tastes the flavor of the solar wind. It is a celestial invitation, a transition from total deflection to a controlled and focused entry of stellar matter. This opening is not a failure of our shield, but a necessary and rhythmic part of the planetary interaction. It allows the magnetosphere to breathe, taking in the energy of the sun and processing it through the complex channels of our planetary field. The temporary door ensures that the relationship between Earth and Sun remains a dynamic and interactive exchange of energy. Deep within this newly opened gateway, The high-energy solar particles are not allowed to scatter aimlessly toward the inhabited surface. Instead, they are captured by the Earth's own field lines and funneled safely and naturally toward the barren, uninhabited polar regions. This funneling process is directed by the geometry of our planet's magnetic poles, which act as the ultimate drainage points for the energy of the storm. The ions spiral downward along these invisible tracks, gaining speed as they approach the dense layers of the atmosphere. They are guided with terrifying precision, steered away from the equatorial civilizations and into the frozen reaches of the high north and south. This gravitational and magnetic steering ensures that the most intense radiation is delivered only to the areas where life is sparse and resilient. This funneling is the mechanism that transforms a planetary threat into a localized and beautiful event. The polar cusps are the specific locations where the breath of the sun finally touches the edge of our world. It is a focused delivery of cosmic power, a controlled descent that prepares the stage for the final glowing display of the aurora. Behind the planet, far away from the crushing pressure of the solar wind, the magnetosphere stretches out into a long and flowing tail. This massive structure, known as the magnetotail, extends for millions of miles into the dark, resembling the luminous and wispy tail of a passing comet. It is a grand and trailing wake, a record of the Earth's movement through the constant stream of the sun's breath. The magnetotail is composed of two giant lobes of magnetic field lines that have been swept back by the force of the solar compression. It is the most expansive part of our planetary domain, reaching out far beyond the orbit of the moon into the deep night. Within this tail, the solar ions that entered through the dayside door are gathered and stored in a state of suspended animation. Notice the quiet rhythm of your heart, a steady pulse that exists safely within the pocket of space protected by this trailing tail. You are shielded from the direct glare of the sun by the massive bulk of the Earth, yet you are still enveloped in its trailing magnetic influence. This tail is our world's shadow in the magnetic universe, a long and graceful reaching into the eternal night. Notice how the pressure temporarily reshapes our protective bubble, cleanly storing the energy of the solar wave within its flexible magnetic tail. The magnetotail acts as a giant cosmic battery, meticulously saving the power delivered by the star's exhalation. As the storm intensifies, the tail is stretched further and further into the dark, becoming increasingly thin and heavily burdened with stored tension. This energy is not lost, it is buffered, building a reservoir of power that will eventually need to be released back toward the planet. This storage phase is a period of quiet accumulation, where the magnetosphere holds its breath while the solar wind continues its relentless push. The tail becomes a focus of incredible potential, a coiled spring of planetary magnetism waiting for the right moment to snap. This process is a beautiful and orderly way to manage the overwhelming influx of solar power. It prevents the atmosphere from being overwhelmed by a sudden surge, instead managing the energy within the vast emptiness of the magnetotail. It is a system of balance and patience, a magnetic checking of the star's sudden and violent account. Eventually, the tension within the overstretched magnetotail reaches its absolute limit and triggers a sudden, night-side explosion of motion. When this extended tail finally snaps back through a second reconnection event, it accelerates the trapped particles downward with incredible force. These ions are shot back toward Earth, racing along the field lines into the safety of the upper atmosphere with newfound kinetic fury. This snap is the resolution of the planetary stress, a swift and total resetting of the magnetosphere's distorted geometry. It is known as a substorm, a localized release of energy that fuels the most brilliant and active displays of the northern and southern lights. The stored energy of the sun is finally delivered to the atmosphere, not from the front, but from the darkness of the tail. This redirected surge is the final stage of the solar material's journey, a homecoming that occurs in the deep hours of the night. The particles strike the air with a velocity that triggers the glowing colours we see from the ground. It is the definitive act of the earthly embrace, where the planet finally absorbs and transforms the energy it has so carefully managed. In spite of the intensity of these magnetic doors and tail snaps, the vast majority of the solar cloud never actually touches our world. Most of the travelling plasma is simply deflected by the strength of our shield, flowing around Earth exactly like a river around a smooth stone. The magnetosphere acts as a cosmic prow, parting the sea of ions and allowing them to pass harmlessly into the outer solar system. This deflection is our primary defence, ensuring that only a tiny fraction of the Sun's fury ever enters our local environment. The bulk of the billion-ton exhalation continues its journey toward the outer planets, its path slightly altered but its energy mostly intact. We're a small island in a vast and flowing river of fire, protected by the invisible curve of our magnetic armour. This realisation offers a profound sense of security, as it reveals the true efficiency of our planetary shield. We do not need to absorb the entire storm to survive it. We only need to stand firm and let the current pass. The river of ions sails on, leaving our blue world undisturbed in its wake as it seeks the cold horizons of the giants. The blue world stands firm, yet its uppermost fringes begin to catch the final, kinetic echoes of the solar river as it passes. As the funneled solar particles finally dive into the thickening layers of our atmosphere, they undergo a miraculous and glowing transformation of energy. These high-speed ions, having travelled along the magnetic rails of the earthly embrace, begin to collide with the scattered gas molecules of the upper air, transferring their cosmic momentum in a series of tiny microscopic detonations. Each individual collision acts as a silent spark, a brief moment where the kinetic fury of the sun is converted directly into a glowing burst of visible light. The atmosphere effectively absorbs the impact of the stellar wind, turning a potential radiation hazard into a soft bioluminescent glow that begins to saturate the thin air of the polar cusps. It is a subatomic ballet, where the energy of a million-mile journey is finally surrendered to the protective gases of our home. Surprisingly, the universe chooses this specific method to bleed off the excess energy of the magnetospheric tail, ensuring the survival of the world below. These billions of simultaneous collisions weave together to create a luminous fog, the first visible layer of the celestial tapestry. As you lie in the absolute stillness of your own room, imagine this invisible rain of light seconds away, washing over the frozen reaches of the high atmosphere. Within this shifting sea of collisions, the specific chemistry of our air dictates the primary colours of the radiant display. Oxygen atoms situated in a dense layer roughly 60 to 100 miles above the Earth react to the incoming solar rain with a haunting pale green luminescence. When these atoms are mathematically excited by the impact of a solar electron, they hold on to that extra energy for a fleeting heartbeat, before releasing it as a single, emerald-coloured photon. This specific wavelength of light is the most common and recognisable feature of the northern and southern lights, painting the horizon in a shimmering neon green glow. The green light represents the star's energy being filtered through the most vital element of our survival, a visual proof of the oxygen that sustains our very lives. It is a slow, steady emission that fills the sky with a soft phosphorescent radiance, turning the night into a luminous emerald dreamscape. If we were to look closer at this chemical reaction, we would see a perfect harmony between stellar power and planetary protection. The oxygen atoms act as tiny lanterns, catching the solar spark and holding it aloft for the world to see. This pale green fire does not burn. It simply glows with a cold, mathematical precision that reflects the orderly laws of the subatomic world. As the altitude increases even further, reaching the thin and lonely fringes of space nearly 200 miles high, the same oxygen atoms undergo a much rarer and more delicate transformation. In this ultra-thin environment, the atoms are so far apart that they can hold their excited state for several minutes without colliding with a neighbour. When they finally release their pent-up energy, they emit a rare and ghostly crimson hue that floats like a blood-red mist above the lower green curtains. This deep red light is the highest and most elusive part of the auroral display, often appearing as a soft, diffused glow that bleeds into the star-studded blackness of the deep sky. Because the air is so sparse at these heights, the crimson light is incredibly faint and requires a truly powerful solar storm to become visible to the naked eye. It represents the very top of the atmosphere's reach, the final, reddened gasp of the planet's protective envelope as it brushes against the vacuum. The crimson oxygen emissions are a haunting reminder of the vast scale of our world's atmosphere, extending far beyond the clouds of our daily lives. This delicate red veil hangs like a celestial crown over the polar regions, a high-altitude signal of the most energetic solar events. It is a colour of pure, unadulterated solar influence, a rare gift from the star to the most distant reaches of our air. While the oxygen lanterns define the heights, nitrogen molecules contribute their own beautiful shades to the lower, frayed edges of the auroral curtains. These molecules are much harder to excite than oxygen, requiring a more direct and powerful hit from the incoming solar particles to release their light. When they do, they produce a stunning palette of deep blue and vivid purple, often appearing as a sharp, fringed border at the very bottom of the shimmering green sheets. This lower border often appears to ripple with a frantic, high-speed energy, as the denser air at these altitudes forces more frequent and violent collisions. The purple light acts as a visual anchor for the display, giving the curtains a sense of three-dimensional depth and a sharp electric intensity. It is a more restless and agitated colour than the steady green or the ethereal red, reflecting the struggle of the particles to penetrate the thicker air. Notice how the weight of your resting limbs feels perfectly supported, much like the way these dense layers of nitrogen support the bottom of the glowing sky. You're safe beneath this heavy, purple-fringed blanket of air, which successfully stops the final remains of the solar storm. This colour is the definitive sign that the star's journey has met the true resistance of the planet's dense, life-giving atmosphere. These curtains can stretch for thousands of miles across the horizon, undulating and folding like luminous ghosts in a light-speed wind. They move with a fluid, liquid grace that seems to defy the stillness of the freezing air below. The stars remain visible through the transparent folds of the green and purple light, creating a sense of being caught between the solid Earth and the infinite reach of the cosmos. This silent dance is one of the most hypnotic and relaxing sights in the natural world, a slow-motion unravelling of energy that demands total attention. The ribbons pulse and sway, disappearing in one part of the sky only to reappear with a soft emerald glow in another. It is a silent dialogue between the star and the planet, a visual representation of the invisible forces that govern our solar system. During periods of intense solar activity, the geometry of this display undergoes a dramatic and expansive shift. The auroral oval, the natural halo of light that usually stays tightly confined to the Arctic and Antarctic circles, begins to swell and push toward the equator. This expansion allows the shimmering lights to be seen from much lower latitudes, bringing the star's visual conclusion to people who live far from the frozen poles. This movement is driven by the increased pressure on the magnetosphere, which forces the magnetic field lines to bow and bend further toward the planet's middle. When a major solar flare sends a powerful ejection toward us, the resulting magnetic storm can push the green curtains over temperate forests and even warm tropical coastlines. It is as if the sun's reach has grown longer, pulling the beauty of the poles down to meet the rest of the world. Surprisingly, these rare sightings provide a unifying experience for the entire planet, as everyone under the night sky watches the same solar breath manifest in the air. The expansion is a temporary stretching of our world's natural boundaries, a moment where the cold horizons of the north are shared with the warm nights of the south. It is a powerful reminder that we are all passengers on the same small world, protected by the same invisible shield. As the curtains drift, these shifting displays follow the invisible magnetic field lines exactly, creating towering vertical pillars of pure light that reach toward the stars. Because the solar particles are confined to these magnetic tracks, they can only move along the paths that the Earth's core has already laid out. This creates a highly organized vertical structure to the light, making the sky look like a grand celestial cathedral built of emerald and violet fire. When you look directly up into the center of an active display, these pillars appear to converge at a single point, creating what astronomers call a corona. This perspective gives the impression of a giant flower made of light blooming directly overhead, with petals of green fire reaching down toward every horizon. It is a visual map of the Earth's magnetic field, revealing the geometry of our planet's hidden internal power. Notice the slow, rhythmic rising and falling of your chest, which mirrors the steady, vertical alignment of these pillars of light. You're aligned with the gravity of the world just as the light is aligned with its magnetism. This structural harmony brings a sense of deep, cosmic order to the event, showing that even the most chaotic-looking dance follows a perfect and ancient set of rules. The pulsing, rhythmic movements of the aurora do not happen by chance. They perfectly mirror the shifting solar winds blowing millions of miles away. Every flicker of the green light and every sudden surge in the purple fringe is a direct response to a variation in the stream of ions flowing from the sun. The sky acts as a giant real-time television screen, broadcasting the current mood of the star into our own atmosphere. When the solar wind hits a sudden patch of turbulence, the auroral curtains respond with a frantic, rippling motion that races across the sky at thousands of miles per hour. When the wind settles into a steady, calm flow, the lights relax into a soft, diffused glow that barely moves against the stars. We are watching the heartbeat of the sun through a planetary-scale lens of oxygen and nitrogen. This connection between the sun's deep space breath and our local night sky is a profound bridge across the 93-million-mile void. The light we see is the physical evidence of a journey that began days ago at the solar surface. The aurora is the final, local echo of a much larger story, a visual translation of the star's kinetic energy into a language we can understand. In the silent, frozen nights of the past, these lights were a source of comfort and storytelling, a way to explain the immense and terrifying power of the heavens. Some cultures believed the lights were a sign of fertility or a warning of great changes, but all agreed on their profound and haunting beauty. They were seen as a bridge between the physical world and the realm of the divine, a visible manifestation of the unseen forces that watch over the world. As you rest in the modern world, you are part of this long line of human observers, finding peace in the same emerald glow that your ancestors watched thousands of years ago. The aurora is a constant in a changing world, a reliable reminder of our place in the cosmic order. This shared history of wonder is a vital part of the auroral experience, connecting us to the ancient soul of our species. This breathtaking phenomenon is the highly visible, incredibly beautiful conclusion of the solar flare's long and arduous journey. From the first snapping of magnetic silk in the solar corona to the long, silent trek across the starlit void, all the energy of the star has been seeking this final moment of transformation. The flare is no longer a violent eruption or a threatening wave of ions. It has become a masterpiece of light and colour that honours the planet's protection. The journey that began with a silent detonation high above the golden surface of the sun ends here, in a soft, emerald glow over the frozen tundra. The star's fury has been successfully filtered, managed, and finally celebrated by the Earth's own atmosphere. It is a successful balancing of the cosmic scales, where the raw power of the universe is turned into a thing of pure, unadulterated peace. The aurora is the sun's final signature on our world, a testament to the fact that we are never truly separate from our star. As the light eventually fades back into the dark, it leaves the atmosphere cleansed and the magnetic fields resettled. The solar flare's story is complete, ending not with destruction, but with a silent and radiant promise of continued life. the silent and radiant promise of continued life is not merely a fleeting moment in our current sky. It is a narrative that has been meticulously archived for aeons within the planet's frozen crust. Long before the first telescopes were pointed toward the heavens, the long history of the sun's greatest flares was being secretly recorded in the oldest, deepest ice on our planet. This frozen parchment, buried beneath miles of crushing pressure and absolute silence, holds the chemical memories of every great solar temper tantrum and every period of quiet, magnetic grace. As we stand upon the modern world, we are walking atop a massive frozen ledger of cosmic history that ensures the past is never truly forgotten. This archive serves as the ultimate memory of our world, a physical record of the celestial forces that have shaped the path of biological history over countless generations. The ice does not merely store water, it stores the pulse of the solar system itself. When high-energy solar protons strike the upper atmosphere with sufficient force, they trigger a series of nuclear transmutations that birth rare chemical isotopes like beryllium-10 and carbon-14. These atoms are not native to our lower air, but are instead the radioactive offspring of cosmic collisions, occurring at the very edge of our world's gaseous envelope. They represent a physical piece of the solar event, a chemical residue of the sun's fury captured and transformed by our planet's protective gas shield. If we were to look closer at the subatomic scale, we would see these new isotopes as tiny, glowing cinders of a celestial fire that has long since burned out. They are the only tangible remains of a light show that once dominated the prehistoric night, drifting through the air as invisible messengers of a distant explosion. As they form, they become part of the global chemical cycle, hitching a ride on the complex currents of the upper atmosphere. These isotopes act as a natural stopwatch, their steady radioactive decay providing scientists with a way to date the exact moment they were created by the sun's touch. They are the fingerprints of the solar flare, left behind in the thin air to be eventually gathered by the frozen reaches of the poles. This chemical birth is the first step in a journey that will end in the deep, silent ice. Surprisingly, the universe does not allow these microscopic chemical markers to stay suspended in the high atmosphere, but instead initiates a long downward drift toward the surface. Guided by the grand, global circulation of the polar winds, they eventually settle onto the quiet, pristine snowscapes of Antarctica and Greenland. This gentle descent is a silent falling of cosmic dust, a slow-motion rain of history that blankets the most isolated and untouched regions of our world. As they land, they are incorporated into the fresh snow, becoming a permanent and unmoving part of the polar landscape. This process ensures that the polar regions serve as the ultimate catch basins for the sun's historical activity, filtering the global air for the chemical secrets of the stars. The vast white plains of the south and the north become a collector's plate for the debris of solar storms. Each flake of snow carries a tiny atomic secret, a message from the sun that has travelled 93 million miles to find a home in the ice. This settling is a peaceful conclusion to a violent beginning, as the energy of the flare is finally anchored to the solid ground. The polar wilderness becomes a pristine record keeper, protecting the isotopes from the noise and contamination of the rest of the world. Year after year, new fallen snow traps these layers safely, compressing the airy flakes into solid, crystalline ice that forms a perfectly chronological library of the past. Each distinct layer of the glacier acts as a time capsule, holding the specific isotopic signature of the sun during that particular season. This vertical stack of frozen time allows the Earth to maintain an unbroken record of solar behaviour, stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. Notice how your own surroundings feel stable and unchanging, mirroring the deep, frozen stillness of these ancient archives. This grounding reality is what allows the planet to preserve the volatile secrets of the star in a state of absolute icy preservation. The weight of the world above presses down on the years below, turning the history of the sun into a transparent glass-like substance. This library is organised by gravity and time, ensuring that the most recent events are at the top while the ancient mysteries are buried miles below. It is an archive that never needs maintenance, a self-building record that grows with every winter storm and every summer thaw. The ice becomes a physical bridge between the deep time of the Earth and the eternal cycles of the Sun. Scientists now venture to these frozen ends of the Earth to drill deep into the heart of the glaciers, extracting long, cylindrical ice cores for study. These clear tubes of ice clearly reveal thousands of years of solar behaviour, allowing researchers to count the years by the visible layers trapped within the glass-like depths. By analysing the concentration of beryllium-10 in each slice, they can reconstruct a year-by-year history of the solar wind and the frequency of massive flares. It is a forensic investigation of the Sun, conducted in the most remote and challenging laboratories on the planet. The ice speaks in a language of isotopes, telling a story of cycles and surges that would otherwise be lost to the void. Each core is a precious artifact, a vertical timeline that reveals how the star has pulsed and breathed throughout the history of human life. If we were to look closer at a single bubble of air trapped within the core, we would be tasting the atmosphere of 1,000 years ago. This physical connection to the past is what makes the ice cores so vital to our understanding of the present. They provide the context we need to see the Sun not as a snapshot, but as a living, evolving entity with a long and storied history. A massive, sudden spike in these isotopes perfectly pinpoints a historical solar storm that occurred long before modern astronomy existed. These dramatic chemical surges reveal that the Sun is capable of producing superflares far more powerful than anything we have witnessed in the satellite era. One such event, recorded in the ice from nearly 10,000 years ago, suggests a day when the sky was saturated with the Sun's physical breath. These frozen peaks provide a baseline for the true potential of our star, showing us the limits of its energy release and the resilience of our planet. They are silent markers of past chaos, preserved in a medium that never forgets a single cosmic touch. By identifying these spikes, we can map the frequency of the Sun's most violent eruptions and prepare for their eventual return. Notice the weight of your body resting securely, a stark contrast to the immense power of the storms recorded in these frozen layers. You are a part of the same world that survived those ancient events, a world that has already seen the Sun's greatest outbursts and emerged into the light. The ice confirms that while the Sun is powerful, the Earth's protection is ancient and incredibly effective. This cosmic structure of memory is not limited to the ice, as living organisms also play their part in recording the Sun's historical moods. Tree rings steadily absorb these subtle atmospheric changes, providing a reliable biological ledger that mirrors the data found in the glaciers. As a tree breathes in the carbon-14 generated by solar protons, it locks that information into its woody tissue during its annual growth cycle. This creates a secondary record that is highly localized and incredibly precise, often allowing scientists to date solar events to the exact year of their occurrence. If we were to look closer at the grain of an ancient pine, we would see the Sun's heartbeat written in the rings of its life. The trees of our world are living sensors, documenting the fluctuations of the solar wind in their very marrow. Notice the steady rhythm of your own breath, a modern echo of the life that has stood witness to the Sun for centuries. You're connected to these ancient trees by the air you share and the star that sustains you both. This biological record ensures that the Sun's history is not just a geological fact, but a lived experience shared by all living things on this planet. The famous Carrington event of 1859, the most powerful solar storm in recorded human history, left an indelible and quiet signature buried deep within these natural planetary archives. While telegraph operators at the time watched their equipment spark and fail, the ice and the trees were silently absorbing the isotopic rain of the event. Analysing these samples reveals a massive surge that dwarfs the daily baseline of solar activity, confirming the intensity of that historic September day. This physical record allows us to compare the flares of the past with the observations of the present, bridging the gap between historical narrative and hard data. It is a benchmark of solar power, a chemical scar that proves the sun's capacity for sudden, overwhelming outbursts. The signature of 1859 is a reminder that the events we study today are part of a much larger and more powerful narrative. If we were to look closer at the ice layers from that year, we would see the chemical echo of a global aurora that turned the night into day. It is a moment of high drama preserved in a state of absolute quiet, a testimony to the day the sun touched the earth with unprecedented force. The Carrington event is our most recent reminder that the star's history is still being written in the ice. Examining these ancient echoes across multiple millennia proves conclusively that our sun has maintained a highly steady and predictable rhythm. Despite the occasional super flare, the star's overall activity follows a reliable and rhythmic pattern of cycles that has remained unchanged since the dawn of human civilization. This long-term perspective reveals that the solar dynamo is a stable engine, operating within well-defined boundaries that foster the continued existence of life. The ice tells us that the sun is not a chaotic or dying light, but a disciplined and ancient source of energy that has guided our world for aeons. This realization brings a profound sense of peace, knowing that the star's behavior is part of a grand and sustainable cycle. We are the beneficiaries of a stellar stability that has been proven over hundreds of thousands of years of recorded history. Surprisingly, the universe offers this stability as a foundation for everything we have ever built or dreamed. The sun's steady heartbeat is the fundamental rhythm of our existence, a reliable pulse that we can trust across the ages. The ice is the proof of this cosmic contract, a frozen guarantee that the sun will continue to shine with a steady and predictable grace. These frozen records offer a deeply comforting reminder that the Earth has successfully weathered immense solar events since the dawn of time. Our magnetosphere and atmosphere have faced countless barrages of high-energy particles and radiation, yet the world below has remained vibrant and resilient. The very existence of these ice cores is a testament to the planet's ability to protect its archives and its inhabitants from the most violent stellar outbursts. We are part of a planet that is built to endure, a world that has already seen the worst the sun has to offer and emerged into a new morning every single time. The echoes in the ice are not a warning, but a reassuring promise of our world's enduring strength and the star's vital role in our journey. They show us that we are safe within the earthly embrace, protected by a system that has been tested by the greatest forces in the universe. As the light of the sun eventually fades into the dark each night, it leaves behind a record of its presence that will outlast us all. The solar flare's story is complete, ending not with destruction, but with a silent and radiant promise of continued life. We can rest in the knowledge that our history is safely frozen in the ice, waiting for the future to rediscover the wonder of the sun. This radiant promise of continued life reveals a fundamental truth about the nature of our star and the delicate balance of our existence. The massive energy released during a solar flare is not a chaotic waste or a meaningless explosion, but a vital component of the complex stellar engine that sustains our entire solar system. These sudden bursts act as pressure valves, regulating the sun's internal magnetic stress and ensuring the long-term stability of the star. Without this periodic release of energy, the magnetic fields would continue to tangle and tighten until they threaten the structural integrity of the star's outer layers. The flares are the necessary exhaust of a perfectly tuned cosmic machine, a byproduct of the same processes that generate the steady, life-giving light we depend upon. They represent the sun's way of maintaining its internal health, shedding excess tension so that the broader rhythm of the star can remain constant for billions of years. As you rest here, understand that the very violence of the flare is what allows the sun to remain a stable and reliable source of warmth. It is a paradox of creation where localized outbursts ensure the tranquility of the whole. This realization transforms our view of the star from a distant fire into a sophisticated and self-regulating guardian of the light. Beyond the planetary orbits, the sun's influence extends much further than we can perceive with our limited senses. The constant outward pressure of the solar wind, frequently punctuated by massive ejections of plasma, carves out a protective outer bubble known as the heliosphere. This immense, invisible structure defines the true boundary of our solar system, acting as a sovereign territory shaped entirely by the star's own breath. The bubble expands far into the dark, pushing back against the cold, encroaching pressure of the interstellar medium. It is a monumental architecture of energy, a hollow sphere that encompasses every planet, moon, and asteroid within its protective reach. The sun does not merely sit at the centre of our world, it actively creates the very space in which our world is allowed to exist. Every solar flare and every coronal mass ejection adds its own unique signature to this grand, expanding envelope. They are the pulses that keep the bubble inflated, ensuring that the void between the stars remains separated from our local sanctuary. The sun is a sculptor of space, using its own discarded material to build a fortress for the family of worlds it guides. Surprisingly, the universe has designed this immense heliosphere to serve as a silent and formidable shield for the entire solar system. It protects us from a continuous and lethal bombardment of harsh, high-energy interstellar cosmic rays that originate from distant dying stars and supermassive black holes. Without this solar barrier, these tiny but powerful bullets of radiation would flood our planetary orbits, making the survival of delicate life almost impossible. The magnetic fields carried by the solar wind act as a web that catches and deflects these interstellar invaders, slowing them down or turning them away entirely. It is a magnificent cosmic filter, ensuring that only the gentlest and most predictable energies reach the inner planets. While we often think of the sun's outbursts as a threat, they are actually the primary reason we're not scoured by the much harsher radiation of the deep galaxy. Notice how your own body remains perfectly shielded and secure, mirroring the way the planets are cradled within this vast solar cocoon. The stillness you feel is made possible by the constant, invisible struggle at the edge of the heliosphere. We live in a pocket of calm, maintained by a star that refuses to let the violence of the deeper universe breach its borders. This overarching magnetic canopy spans billions of miles, reaching out to the very edges of the solar system to block the most energetic particles from entering. It is a dynamic and living shield that grows stronger or more complex in direct response to the sun's own internal cycles. The star effectively wraps its children in a protective cloak, using the same magnetic forces that trigger flares to ensure our long-term safety. This realization brings a profound sense of scale to our understanding of the solar system's architecture. We are not just a planet orbiting a star, but a part of a larger unified magnetic organism. The sun's turbulence is the very tool it uses to keep the darkness of the galaxy at bay. We are safe because our star is active, vibrant, and fiercely protective of the space it occupies. Deep within the ancient history of our world, the most violent outbursts of the star may have provided the very spark needed to ignite the flame of life. Interestingly, the intense ultraviolet light from ancient flares may have provided the necessary energy to synthesize early organic molecules within the Earth's primitive atmosphere. These high-energy photons acted as a catalyst, breaking and reforming chemical bonds to create the fundamental building blocks of biology. In the primordial soup of the early Earth, the sun's fury was not a destroyer, but a creative architect that pushed matter toward complexity. Every burst of radiation was a tiny, localized experiment in the chemistry of existence, providing the raw energy required for the first amino acids to form. The very light that we now consider a risk was once the midwife of our own biological origin. This connection between stellar violence and biological creation is one of the most beautiful paradoxes in all of science. It suggests that our existence is not an accident, but a direct result of the star's dynamic and energetic nature. We are, in a very real sense, the children of the solar flare, born from the energy of an ancient and explosive light. Notice how the rhythmic, 11-year cycle of solar activity acts as a gentle heartbeat that steadily drives the mechanics of our local cosmos. This constant ebb and flow of sunspots and flares is not a sign of instability, but a predictable and healthy pulse that governs the environment of every planet. It is a cosmic metronome, marking the passage of time with a series of magnetic peaks and valleys that have persisted for billions of years. This heartbeat influences everything from the density of our upper atmosphere to the intensity of the auroras dancing over the poles. It is a cycle of renewal, where the sun builds up its tension and then releases it in a grand and orderly fashion. The predictability of this pulse provides a sense of deep security, revealing that the star's moods are part of a stable and well-regulated system. Your own resting breath, slow and steady, is a miniature reflection of this grand solar rhythm. You are synchronized with the star's own internal clock, a passenger on a world that breathes in unison with its parent. This rhythmic duality of activity and calm is the fundamental law of the solar system, a steady beat that ensures the continuity of the light. This structure of knowledge we build from the sun extends far beyond our own localized home in the dark. Studying these solar flares allows humanity to deeply understand the fundamental magnetic physics that govern all stars across the entire universe. Our sun is the only star we can observe in such intimate and exquisite detail, serving as a Rosetta Stone for the billions of other suns that populate the Milky Way. Every reconnection event and every particle acceleration we witness here provides the data needed to understand the mechanics of the cosmos. We see the same physics playing out in distant nebulae and around powerful quasars, proving that the laws of nature are universal and consistent. The sun is our classroom, teaching us the secrets of the stellar engine and the hidden life of the elements. By looking closer at our own star, we're effectively looking at the heart of the universe itself. The solar flare is a localized laboratory where we can test our theories and refine our understanding of the forces that hold the stars together. This intellectual journey is a testament to our curiosity, a bridge between the smallness of the human mind and the immensity of the stellar sky. Our growing technological awareness of space weather represents a profound and beautiful connection between human minds and stellar phenomena. We no longer view the sun as a distant and inscrutable god, but as a dynamic and understandable neighbour whose moods we can predict and prepare for. This awareness is a new stage in our evolution, where we have moved from being passive observers to active participants in the solar environment. The satellites we place in the dark and the models we build on the ground are the sensory organs of our civilization, reaching out to feel the star's breath. Every time we forecast a coming storm or adjust our technology to the solar wind, we're engaging in a silent dialogue with the sun. It is a relationship built on data and wonder, a bridge of understanding that spans the void. This grounding awareness allows us to live in harmony with the star's activity, transforming a source of fear into a source of knowledge. We are technologically entwined with the sun, our systems reacting to its pulses just as our atmosphere does. This connection is a hallmark of our current era, a time when we have finally learned to read the sun's signature in the sky. The sun is a singular and unified force, expressing itself in both a whisper of warmth and a roar of radiation. The photons that fuel the process of photosynthesis were born in the same furnace as the particles that fuel the auroras. This realization brings a deep and comforting unity to our world, showing that the power that shapes the heavens is the same power that sustains the earth. As you rest, consider the trees outside your window, silently drinking in the remains of the sun's daily work. They are the living evidence of this stellar paradox, transforming the energy of a distant nuclear fire into the solid reality of wood and leaf. The sun's duality is the very thing that makes life possible, providing both the protection of the shield and the nourishment of the light. Ultimately, embracing the duality of the sun's dynamic nature brings a profound sense of peace regarding our secure place in the cosmic order. We are not fragile victims of a chaotic universe, but participants in a beautifully complex and well-regulated system of energy and matter. The star's activity is not a threat to be feared, but a sign of a healthy and vibrant star that is doing exactly what it was meant to do. This profound realization allows us to look at the sun with a sense of gratitude rather than anxiety. We understand that the flares, the ejections, and the solar wind are all parts of a grand and life-giving cycle that has protected us for billions of years. Our world is a sanctuary, a perfectly positioned jewel that is cradled by the forces of the sun and the laws of the universe. The stillness of your resting body is a final proof of this security, a testament to the stability of the earthly embrace and the star's enduring light. You can rest in the knowledge that the sun is watching over the solar system, maintaining the balance and ensuring the continuation of the journey. We are home, we are safe, and we are part of the light. The solar flare is not an interruption of the sun's peace, but the very mechanism through which the star maintains the harmony of our existence. Deep within the architecture of our solar system, the final realization settles like soft dust upon a distant moon. The solar flare, once appearing as a violent disruption, is revealed as the very pulse that maintains the delicate equilibrium of our existence. It is the star's necessary breath, a rhythmic clearing of tension that ensures the golden light remains steady for all the nights to come. This quiet room is now a sanctuary where the long journey of the sun finally finds its rest. Your toes begin to feel heavy, as if the very gravity of the earth is pulling them into the soft layers of your bed. Let the muscles in your feet dissolve, releasing any remaining tension from the day's movement. Surprisingly, the body knows exactly how to sink into this state of total surrender. The calves and knees become weightless, and the heavy muscles of the thighs let go of their grip. Every fibre of your legs is now as still as a frozen glacier in the heart of an ancient winter. If we were to look closer at the rhythm of your resting form, we would see the hips and lower back melting into the mattress. The spine settles into its natural curve, supported by the soft embrace of the fabric beneath you. All the energy that carried you through the waking hours is now receding like a tide. The muscles of your chest allow the heart to maintain a slow and steady beat that requires no effort from your mind. The stomach softens, and the shoulders drop away from the neck, falling deep into the pillow. Your arms feel like heavy velvet, still and unmoving by your sides. Your hands and fingers grow warm and quiet, resting in the absolute peace of the sheets. The neck and jaw release their last hidden tensions, and the tongue rests gently in the mouth. Every feature of the face becomes smooth, from the corners of the eyes to the center of the brow. This fabric against your skin is smooth and comforting, a tactile reminder of the sanctuary you have created here. The weight of the blanket is a gentle pressure that signals the brain it is time for the final descent. You are drifting into a place where only the sound of your own breath exists. The silence of the house is a heavy velvet curtain that has been pulled shut for the night. Every corner of the room is filled with a sense of completion and profound rest. You are sinking deeper into the mattress with every passing moment, becoming one with the stillness. This rest is deep, restorative, and entirely earned. The darkness is a friendly presence, inviting you to let go of the waking world. You're falling through layers of soft clouds into a sleep that is perfect. And now, 101 wonders are resting with you. Sleep now. Good night.